Hi, everyone, and welcome to Crushing Doubts Q&A every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. It is great to be back here with you all. I missed you over Thanksgiving. I hope that everybody had a good Thanksgiving holiday. And of course, I know it can be a stressful time for people. So Thanksgiving can be a time where we can have lots of symptoms. Symptoms can come up at any time, but any time where there's a lot of emotional upset in the emotions column, you can have a lot more. So as always, we're here to talk about your mind-body symptoms, what's been going on for you, how to understand your mind-body world. We've got the 3 columns. They're an organizing principle that I use all the time on myself. And they help me to not only orient around what the symptoms are doing, but they help me figure out what's going on with me. So I'm excited to be back here with you all. A little reminder that there are certain ways that you can help yourself in working with me. I do have pre-recorded seminars. There will be live ones coming up again soon, but I'm focusing on getting the book done right now. So for now, we've got the pre-recorded seminars. And not only that, but I've created an introductory seminar that is similar information in some regards, but just it's less drawn out and I don't say drawn out like that's a bad thing. It's just less in depth. And some people would prefer a more cost-effective way to just dip in rather than having to jump the whole way in and go with the seminars. But they're both good options. That option will be out to you guys in the next couple of weeks. So I just wanted to let you know about it. The introductory course, it's kind of an introductory seminar. Now, the way the seminars used to be, I think of those as the advanced seminars. So these are ways that you can get the information you need. Then you're going to need to know what to do with it. Well, you can certainly come to the Q&A and get your questions answered, but my membership groups are the place where things flow into so that you can always have time with me. It's always an option. I meet 3 days a week. I do take some days off, but there's 3 days a week. You can meet once, twice, or 3 days a week. And it's a time to come practice your mind-body experience, practice with the columns, practice the system, and get what you need. Let me say hi to a couple people who have joined me here. Daniel Starkey has joined, Newcastle Housewife, Laura Court, and Majida03 has joined on Instagram. It's good to see you here. I did have problems a couple weeks ago getting Instagram comments. So if for some reason that's happening, it shouldn't because I restarted my phone. But if for some reason that's happening, come over to YouTube and you can get your questions in that way, or at least let me know that there is a problem with Instagram. I don't anticipate there's going to be. It doesn't seem like there is. So, but if somebody wants to put in a comment, I'll be able to see if it's working. Okay, a couple people to say hi to on YouTube as well. Dorisa, good to see you here. She says, hi, Dan and everyone. I'll put up the comments so people can see it. Jane Smith has joined. Hi, Dr. Dan. Thanks again for being here. I missed you too. Thanks, Jane. Good to have you back. Patty Martin says, hi, Dan. Good to see you, Patty. And Mary Cloud says, hi, Dr. Dan. This is Catherine Toomer using my daughter's computer. Okay. So I was going to say it's a new name, Mary Cloud, but actually Catherine Toomer, I know you well. New and old names, all welcome. So as usual, this is a time for you to ask your questions. You guys know this, but my system is based on questions. And the reason that this happened, it might be good to do a little bit of background, especially for people who are just joining us now, is that when I was getting better from mind-body work, I read Dr. Sarno, and it was incredibly enlightening. And Dr. Sarno certainly saved my life. But as I was reading, I still had lots of questions. And one of the things that I did is I went to see Eric Sherman. Eric is a great psychologist who trained under Dr. Sarno and with Arlene Feinblatt, who is fantastic. I don't know if you guys got to see my interview with her on Crushing Doubt. I did 2 interviews with her, actually, and she's just fantastic. But Eric trained with her, and so I went figuring I need help. I need to get some answers. And here's what I was surprised about. I'm very good at articulating what my questions are, so it's a natural talent of mine and maybe one of the reasons that the system plays out the way it does. But I asked him probably 200 questions in one sitting, and his answers were really great. But it wasn't just that his answers were great. It was that I realized how important it is to get our questions answered. Dr. Sarno said it's incredibly important for people to accept the diagnosis. Well, another way of thinking about it is we need to be clear on what's happening. If we have questions, then we're still kind of at sea with things. We've got to figure out what's going on. I'm here to answer those questions to your satisfaction. So if I don't answer them to your satisfaction, push on that. That's what we do in this system. It's all based on questions though, so Q&A is pretty useful. Rita has joined us on Instagram. Good to see you here, Rita. Thanks so much for joining. I will get into a preloaded question. Let me just say, if you want to get a question answered, and let's say you can't come, let's say you live in England and you're going to be up pretty late, if you needed to watch it, well, you can send me an email. It's dan@crushingdoubt.org. I'll get it. I will consider it and bring it into the Q&A. So we're going to load that in here. But first, we have a comment from Karen Isaacs. Good to see you here, Karen. Welcome back. Missed it, you. I'm going through a huge life change. I had a cold for 2 weeks, no surprise. It felt like grief. I just let it ride. Then last 2 nights, I woke up middle of night with a headache. So Karen, first of all, I like the way that you're thinking about it. We always want to think emotionally. And what I mean by that is to not think physically, actually. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to think about our emotional lives in specific, but it just means that the way you're thinking about it is that your mental or your emotional state, whatever's going on up here, is getting translated into the body. I had a discussion about this in group recently about colds, and I think this is an important one. Colds come from a real virus. Germs are real. I'm totally scientific. I'm not going to reject anything that's scientific. But the reality is that your immune system responds to your stress level. If your stress level is way high, your immune system goes down. If your stress is not so high, your immune system's up running and strong. I once said to a friend, somebody could sneeze directly into your face and you wouldn't get a cold if they had a cold. If your immune system is running well, the germs are still there. But Karen's pointing out, I'm going through a big life change, and Karen, I know what some of that is. You can feel free to introduce that if you want to. I never want to share information that is not something you want to say, though I know we tend to be pretty open book as a community, which is something I love about us. So I think that just keeping track, though, regardless of these big life changes and knowing that they're going to affect us physically as well as emotionally, yes, no surprise. One thing I'll say is when you're working in the emotions column, though, let's say you're trying to deal with that headache and figure out what it is because that's an onset or an uptick. Let's get specific. So we know you're going through the life change, but what we may not know, certainly I don't know it, but you might not either, is what does it mean specifically? Like a big life change could mean a loss of something from before. It could mean anxiety about what you're going to. It could mean a sense of the passage of time and mortality. It can mean many different things. And the more specific we get in the emotions column, the better. Karen says, before bed, I do a self-soothing routine. That's something that I do recommend, a self-soothing routine. But also, if you want, spend time just thinking about your day. Think about the emotional material of the day. What mattered to you in that day? Did anything loom large? Did anything feel maybe not so good? And pay attention to that. Just by the fact that you are consciously engaged with it, it carries through straight into your unconscious experience in a different way. So I can say more about that, but I do find that's one recommendation I give. If you're having symptoms in the middle of the night, do something before actively to think about your emotional world or to self-soothe or both. Let's see. So, okay, here's Karen's revealing what's happening. And then Jane, I'm going to jump back to your comment. I'm ending a very long, important relationship, not my husband, 36 years. It's been a love-hate. I need to process my feelings of feeling abandoned. So when I go through the types of themes that lead to emotions column symptoms, one of the things that I highlight is big relationships that are that big of a deal. They're very likely to bring up symptoms when something doesn't go well. I mean, this is a 36-year relationship that's been very important. That's going to bring up a lot. One way that I think about it is we're on this journey in life and we don't know how much time we have, which is a scary thing. Hopefully we all have a lot of it, but when something like that happens, it marks the time and you realize, whoa, look at all that time I spent here. Well, and then you ask, was it worth it? There's all kinds of things that come up when you're ending a relationship. So, Karen, I like that you're giving yourself space to process it. Use the symptoms to find out more about what you feel about it. Let's see how it goes, but please do let me know if I can provide insights or help you track things or understand whatever's going on for you. But hang in there and give yourself the space to know this is a big deal. I hear you doing it, but I love that you're doing that. Carrie Nordling, good to see you here on Instagram. Thanks for joining. Okay, Jane Smith says, I feel like I'm getting worse. Okay, I'm sorry to hear that. And we're going to jump right in and make sure we can help with that. 5 days in a row of waking up with headaches, migraines. I feel so down and discouraged. Also, lots of current life stress. Can you please encourage me? Okay, Jane. So first of all, let me give you a little bit of empathy. It's hard when these things happen, and doubt wants us to get scared. And when your fear goes up, the symptoms go up. So I think 5 days in a row of waking up with headaches and migraines, that would make your fear go up. But actually, one thing I want to encourage you is that those symptoms are probably happening more because your fear was going up each day. The first day, that was bad. I hope it doesn't happen again. Fear goes up. Boom, it happens again. Uh-oh, is this a trend? Boom, fear goes up. And this is the way it works. So what we can do now, Jane, is dial it back down. And this is one of the reasons why it's so important to have the ongoing support. I find, I know I don't want to come across as if I'm pushing the groups, because that's not really what I'm doing. What I'm pushing are things that can help you. I love the groups. I think they're fantastic. But the thing that they provide that's so important is practice and regularity. And so let's say it's a fear-based thing, which this is, because it's a repeat symptom that's starting to get you to feel down and discouraged. Discouragement, frustration, all of those things are actually forms of doubt. You're needing something that I think is going to keep bringing down the doubt. Believe it or not, Jane, I think you're going to feel a lot better with me back. I was away 1 week, but that's a big deal when you come here weekly and you don't get that encouragement the rest of the time. Even that alone could lead to extra days of these. So the one thing I want to tell you, Jane, is, and this is encouragement, you make sense and your symptoms make sense. It's something that I say all the time, but it's a really important mantra to remember. You're never stuck because your symptoms are always telling us something. And if they're telling us something and we can interpret what that is, if we can receive the message, we can get rid of these symptoms. Now, remember, the symptoms have a function in each column. In the emotions column, that function is distraction. If we discover what the emotion is, it goes down. But are we working in that column? I would say no, because if doubt is there, we're working in the doubt column. The function in the doubt column is simply the function of the symptoms is to make the symptoms go up, to keep the doubt going, to keep its function. That's the one we need to work in. And that's exactly why you're asking me for encouragement, which I understand anyway, but you have an intuitive knowledge that's going to help me. Obviously, encouragement helps, but you, I think, intuitively understand from working with doubt before that when we bring down doubt, you feel better. And you need help with that. So I'm here. I'm here once a week this way. I'm here in the groups if you need more. And so that's actually 4 days a week I'm available to you guys. And I love that I have that availability because people need that. So you're going to be fine, Jane. In the power column, the function would be to receive the communication. And we could, particularly if we had more time, like in the groups, we can analyze which of these columns is particularly active. But I hear that doubt is anyway. So I want you to jump in on doubt. Let's do some follow-up, Jane. Let me know how that feels, whether it feels encouraging enough, whether it sheds light on things enough, because part of my way of encouraging is making sure that I give you a sense that things can make sense. So let's do some follow-up, Jane. Let me know. Okay, Justine has joined us on Instagram. Good to see you here. I still don't see comments coming in on Instagram, so I don't know if people are making comments. Could I ask somebody in the Instagram crowd to just put a comment? Oh, no, I see Rita did actually put a comment. Nice flowers. Thank you, Rita. So the comments are working. Please do let me know if you do have questions. I'm just going to scroll back to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay. We have a question coming in from Catherine Toomer under her daughter's name, Mary Cloud. Okay. I know that ambivalence, decision-making, feeling that I'm not doing all that I should be doing are all examples of my core narrative issues. So when they come up, can I just remind myself to let them go, to move on with my life? Okay, this is a great question. Thank you, Daniel Starkey, for your comment. He even put comment in there. He's got a clever sense of humor, I can tell. Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it. So the comments are working well. Keep them coming as needed. So, Catherine, What you're talking about here is you're recognizing your core narrative issues, and you say, when they come up, can I just remind myself to let them go, to move on with life? So I'm going to make an important distinction here. When it comes to the columns, the emotions column and the power column are both columns that deal with emotional life. The doubt column deals with thinking. It's not about your emotions. I mean, fear is the emotional form of doubt. So there is emotion in doubt. But in the doubt column, we work with thought. In the emotions column, we work purely with emotions, but we only really work to know about them. We don't necessarily need to do anything with them. It's all about awareness. But in the power column, that's where we decide, what are we going to do with our emotional life? So that's right at the heart of Catherine's question. Can I just remind myself to let them go and move on with life? I would say no. In the power column, and I don't mean that as bad news, Catherine, I actually mean it as good news. Here's why. We're going to help you figure out, what do you need? Because the power column is communicating these symptoms. It's communicating something with these symptoms, and you have to receive the communication. What does it mean to receive the communication? It doesn't mean just to know about it. That's emotions column work. Receiving the communication means that you understand not only what the communication is, but what you need. And that means you're going to need to do something. So let's say it's ambivalence. You said that's one of the ones that comes up. Well, what I want to do in the power column is actually help you to resolve some ambivalence, even just one spot of ambivalence. If we resolve it, you get more powerful. You feel more in charge of your life. So what I would want to do is understand that ambivalence. I'd want to understand it from a power column perspective. How does it make you feel not as powerful? And once we understand that information in the column, we get information on what it is that you need. Then we can start to say, hey, given that you need this, let's look at this ambivalence. You're actually trying to decide between two things. One of them's towards what you need and one of them's not. Now we get some wiggle room to understand, what might you do? You get some clarity. I need to go in this direction. This is the one that was fitting more with what would make me feel powerful. So decision making is the same thing. What I want to encourage you is your experience when you have ambivalence or decision making, or feeling that you're not doing all that you should be doing. It's all calling into question yourself. It's kind of level 3 doubt, which of course we work on in the power column. And I shouldn't say of course, because there may be some people who are learning this, but it is true. If you have level 3 doubt, which is doubt about you and your ability to get things done with the symptoms, that's level 3 doubt, and we work on it in the power column. So what I would want to do, Catherine, here is to articulate what is the ambivalence, and then I want you to look at either side, and I want you to recognize that what's probably keeping you ambivalent is fear of making a decision that's in the service of you. In the power column, these things are not actually going to be as complicated as you think. We make them complicated because we're afraid to be powerful, or we're afraid to make changes, or we're afraid it might bother somebody else. So we stay in this place of believing we can't know what to do. I would say this, in the power column, I'm incredibly decisive. I know what to do a lot of the time. That's what power is. When you are not sure what to do, you're out of power. So this question is a very good one to elucidate just what the power column is all about. We want to get you to a place where you feel powerful. If you feel like you don't know what to do, that's not powerful. And of course, do not mean that as a criticism at all. And it's very natural, and we all have those things. But I want you to recognize, I'm not in power. How can I start to look at this and think, what do I need? That doesn't mean you throw out all other needs. You could still satisfy the needs of other people, but you may first need to figure out, what is it I need? And then how do I meet these other needs in that context? So we'll talk more about that in a second. I just wanted to say hi to E Baggish has joined us on Instagram. Good to see you there. Okay, follow-ups from Catherine. She said, I keep on being afraid that if I let those feelings go, I may be avoiding looking at something that I still need to deal with. Then she said, okay, I'm listening. I wrote the last thing before your response, so ignore for now. Oh, okay. All right. So I'm glad you're listening to that, Catherine. And listen, I know this is hard. Lots of things are hard, but the power column is so rewarding because for once, and this is especially true for Goodists, for once we're paying attention to what we need. We're actually asking the question, what do we need? It doesn't mean we're just going to run headlong towards that and just do whatever we want, but at least we're actually asking it and we can get a lot of information. So, Catherine, I want to see what you come up with from that. Now that you have that bit of information, I also want you to let me know if that feels like it's enough, kind of enough information for you for the moment. Okay, we're gonna bring in a preloaded question here. This is from Laura. Laura said, hold on, I actually need to make sure that I have the whole. I think I'm actually missing something. Oh, I see. We are missing just the tail end of it. I'll put that in also. Give me 1 second. Okay. Laura says, I still listen to all of your YouTube videos faithfully. I've been doing really well, had a great summer, and I'm even in the process of job hunting after not working for 5 years. And that ends with an exclamation point, and that is worth it. I mean, this is one of the reasons I love this work. Look at the impact that we get to have in your lives. And I get to have in mine. You get to have in your own. We get to have on each other. And so, Laura, as you share this information, that's exciting for all of us. But of course, especially exciting for you. You've been stuck in that spot and you're not so much anymore. She says, so thank you for all your help. My pleasure. Then she says, I'm in a major flare for the past month, though. Not sleeping well, in fight or flight for sure, as I'm preparing for my daughter's wedding this week. Do you think it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy because everyone always says wedding planning is stressful, so that's what's going on? Or could it be I'm in fear? Okay, so one thing I want to say is I don't want you to limit how you think about it. It could be about the wedding. It could be that you're in fear for some reason. But what I want you to do is think of it as it's kind of like you're a detective and you're following the clues. So those are two possibilities. I don't actually know. I'd have to know more, but I will say this. If you're noticing a correlation in the timing, major flare as you're preparing for this wedding, that seems very likely to have something in it. What I'd want you to do then is explore the specifics. In the emotions column, we get the best results reducing flares if we understand the specifics of what we're upset about or the specifics of what we're feeling that's leading to this distraction. So don't leave it general. Don't leave it as, oh, this is about the wedding. That's probably true, actually, at least to some degree. You know, is there fear or activated trauma from some other thing? Well, when I get into like a really high kind of trauma activation kind of experience, I ask myself, what got me here? It just happened the other day. Um, you know, I was hearing, it actually just happened some today as well. When I hear about health issues that people have, especially young people, boom, my trauma can just jump right up. And I start thinking about mortality. And sometimes it's just a thought, but sometimes it's a trauma activation. So, Laura, when you're trying to assess, am I just in fear, which I think one way of putting it is my trauma activated versus is it about the wedding in specific? The way that you find out is by exploring, by trying these things on. So try on the wedding idea. Try wondering about it. Try thinking about it. Some people like to journal. Some people like to just do some self-talk. Some people like to just think about it. But you want to spend some time thinking about, well, what does this wedding mean to me? And track your physical symptoms as you go. If you find that you hit on a particular thing and the symptom comes down, you're on the right track. And if you're in the right ballpark, it comes down some. But if you hit it right on, it'll vanish. And so this is a question essentially Laura's asking about, is this an emotions column event or this is my words, of course, or is this a power column event? Because fear, trauma, that's something that happens in the power column in terms of how we work with it. I mean, things happen not in columns, of course, they just happen in life, but the columns help us describe it. So Laura's question could be understood as, am I having an emotions column flare related to this wedding? And if so, she's got to look at the specifics. Or am I having a fear-based response that's more trauma related? And if that's the case, what got me activated? How do I get back to power? So those are two totally different answers to those questions. And there could be other things, but guess what? The good news is it all comes in the column structure. So back up, use the columns. Find the primary column you're working in and do the task of that column. There's only a couple, one or two tasks in each column. In the emotions column, there's only one task. Discover the emotion and pair it with a symptom and understand that pairing. In the doubt column, there's observe, articulate, and counter. And in terms of doubts, those are the 3 steps. And in the power column, you use your core narrative to measure against the moment and see how you're living your life and whether it's in alignment with the way you want to live now versus the way you were. And you want to assess for power and adjust as needed. That's it. I mean, I love that I can sum it up so briefly because it tells you there isn't too much to do, which is good to know. It can get overwhelming otherwise. Okay. E-Baggage says, is it possible to be in fight or flight even if you don't feel that way? Love that question. And I love it for a particular reason. Actually, I would say it's people are often in fight or flight, particularly when they don't feel that way. Meaning that a big part of trauma response is you don't know you're in it. You will know that you're not happy about something or something's bothering you. But you usually in a trauma fight or flight kind of experience, well, I shouldn't say usually. There are plenty of times where we know we're in fight or flight, where somebody's attacking us or, something dangerous is happening. And boom, our stress response goes through the roof. Our central nervous system's going crazy. So there's plenty of times where that happens. I do want to encourage you, though, and this is to your question, it is more than possible. It happens all the time that we just experience it as being bothered, but we don't experience it as fight or flight. I'll give you a really good example of this. Foggy thinking, foggy brain. We can just kind of be dissociative, not really there. I just don't feel present. If that's happening, you're in fight or flight, but it's a very different kind of fight or flight. So I think one way to separate this out is there's the fight or flight that's more direct, where there's a clear threat and you're not from the outside and you're just kind of aware of that. But threats on the inside, those are the ones where we dissociate. Those are the ones where we're in fight or flight, but we don't even realize it. So yes, 100% is possible. E-Baggage, I want you to follow up with that as needed to see if I need to get you more information, but 100%, and it's a great question. Hopefully I shed some light on that and that will help. Best Beloved has joined us on Instagram as well. Thank you for joining us here. Okay, Jane Smith is on YouTube. She says, thanks, Dr. Dan. Yes, I did miss you. Besides your empathy, I think I need your permission to be quote unquote selfish. I am so done. A rage sister in hospital, and I can't do one more thing for anyone else. So Jane, thank you for this comment. I think it's going to help a lot of people. In the columns, it's all about you. You don't have to make it all about you in the external world all the time, because of course that would be not great, but there has to be somewhere where you do make it about you. And in the columns, and as you just sit with yourself, you're allowed to do that. Not only are you allowed to do it, you need to do it. That's how we should be living. It's not selfish, and I know that's why Jane put it in quotes. She knows it's not selfish, but we feel selfish. And so we do have to go ahead and give ourselves permission. One of the reasons that I invented the columns essentially is I kind of needed to retrain myself to think about these things differently, to give myself permission to do some things that I wouldn't normally do. I have a supervision group that I do with people that I've trained in this, which, by the way, if people are interested in training with me, you can certainly let me know. Again, my email is dan@crushingdoubt.org. But when I do these trainings, one of the things that I've thought to tell them is that they've got to develop the ability in the columns to give themselves space to do things that they wouldn't normally do. The power column is especially that way. In the emotions column, we're just recognizing what our emotional life is like and tracking that and being aware of it so that we can reduce symptoms. In the doubt column, we're just getting all of the we're getting our feet under us about what's most important, how to understand things, getting our questions answered, getting to certainty. But in the power column, that's where we get to make decisions about how we're going to live. And the decisions about how we live, we've got to give ourselves permission to live differently. It has to be different. If we do it the same, we're going to end up with the same results. That's what it always is. So the power column, as an example, is a place where I would give myself permission sometimes at the right times, hopefully. If not, I apologize for what happens. But if it's at the right time, as an example, I will give myself permission to be a little more aggressive than I normally would be. I'm a goodist. I'm very nice. I'm always looking out for people. But in the power column, there are times where if I'm too nice, I'm going to take a beating and I need to do something about it. So it gives me a chance to do something differently. So, Jane, it's good to be back with you. I will certainly give you the empathy. I'll give you the permission. And I know you had been watching the Brothers in Arms videos. There's a lot in those Brothers in Arms videos about power column living, where I talk about how to live differently and things I needed to live differently about, both in terms of things that went well and didn't. Jane, please do let me know if that's a helpful answer. Okay, E-Baggage says, thank you. I have low blood pressure and often feel calm. However, I can still feel symptoms. That answer is helpful. Okay, so yeah, fight or flight is not really about, I would say it's not really about the way that people usually think about it. It's not always the feeling of being chased by a lion and feeling super freaked out. Not at all. Fight or flight, in fact, here's another way of thinking about it. They call it fight or flight, but there's actually other forms of it. Fawn is another, where you feel like you've got to let somebody know that you're kind of on their side or you're trying to be nice to them. That can be a trauma response. So instead of thinking about it as fight or flight, I think it's most helpful to think about it as trauma responses. Fight is one of those. Flight is another. Fawn is another. And the last F is freeze, where you really you freeze up. You can't think straight. When that's happening, you're kind of in a bit of trauma. And I don't mean to overstate that, because you can have freeze happen like if you're getting up to play a song for somebody. I play guitar and sing for people, and sometimes it will actually happen. A lot of times I'm totally fine. But interestingly, and this speaks to what we're talking about, I just started writing songs in the last couple of years. And when I get ready to play those for people, I freeze much more, at least I'm more likely to freeze. But I'm getting past that because I recognize it. And so what do? I recognize this is a sign of a trauma response. It doesn't have to be fight or flight. Let's just look for trauma responses instead. Okay, so eBagger says definitely can relate to trauma response. I think that's a more helpful way of thinking about it. Not that anybody's doing anything wrong if they're thinking fight or flight, but it's just it's an expanded version of that. Okay, Jamie Woolner, thank you for joining us here. Can you give your opinion on TMS as flu or cold? Okay, I made some reference to this earlier in the talk about colds, but I'll expand it to flu and revisit that. So here's what I think. One thing that I do pride myself on in this work is I stay very scientific. I'm not getting away from anything that's scientific. And the fact is, viruses are real, germs are real, the flu virus is real, cold virus is real, but they have an interaction effect between people and their immune systems. Now, different viruses and different illnesses work different ways. The recent strain of COVID, or the relatively recent one this summer, I don't know what the current variant's doing, but it was very, very contagious. There are certain viruses that are extremely contagious. However, I find that's not typical. What's more typical is that we have so many beliefs about germs that what we believe helps to determine whether our immune system lowers or not. Stress also determines whether our immune system, goes up or down. I had an event this summer where something happened to my stepdad, or I call him my dad and think of him as my dad. Something happened to him, and I got COVID pretty much right then. I was actually developing it already though, but I got it so much worse because this thing happened to him that was so scary. He ended up being fine, thankfully. But the stress level made my immune system just crash and everything came rushing in. I'm certain of that. So to me, it's an interaction effect. Flu and cold are totally real. They're not TMS. I should be careful about saying that. TMS is real. It's all real. It all happens in your body. But a virus also has its own pathway. So, TMS is a real happening in your body, but we can have control of that. Once you get a flu or cold, once it's really active in your system, you typically can't get rid of it by treating it as a mind-body thing. You can make it better, though. There's an interaction effect. So there's an interaction when it comes to getting colds and flus. And there's also an interaction about how bad does it get? How bad does it feel? You can do things about it. But at the same time, it has a life of its own. Once the germs are really in there and they've gotten through the immune system, they do take hold and it may need to take its course in some way. I will say this, though. You have the best chance of fighting those off right at the beginning. It happens to me very frequently. If I get a little tickle in my throat, I say, nope, this is the potential beginning of a cold. But if I fight this, if I use a mind-body experience to fight this, I can fend this off. And typically that's what happens. I almost never get them. I do get them, but when I do, I'm under a lot more stress or had just been under stress and then gone on vacation. That's a very common one. Jamie, let me know if that's a helpful enough answer and we can go from there. Okay, Jane Smith says, thanks, Dr. Dan. I think I'm also enraged at not being able to do more. If I dissociate, I can do more, but I've been trying not to dissociate. I am confused, afraid, in conflict with myself. Arg. I totally understand, Jane. There's a lot to sort out here, right? And to me, that's part of the value of the columns is they give some information about how to think about these things. And we're making progress in that. I've talked with you about this. I think you have a better sense of what the columns are and how to use them and how to think about them. But when you're confused, afraid, in conflict with yourself, confused and afraid, those are doubt-related words. I'm not saying that critically, but just highlighting there's something going on in your doubt column. We need to bring doubt down. Conflict with the self, though, that's in the power column. So let's use these columns to separate out the problems. Let's isolate the doubts. We're going to observe them. We're going to get them put into words, articulate them. Observing them, by the way, means calling them into question instead of accepting them as fact. So we'll observe, we'll get them into words and articulate them. Then we're going to counter them. And we're going to counter them the way that will work for you. If we do that, your fear will go down. Your confusion will go down. I think of it as, I call this the fear confidence spectrum. We want to move from fear down to confusion. Confusion is actually better than fear. It's not great, but it's better than fear. Then we want to bring it down to just uncertainty. I'm not so confused, but I still don't totally know. And then we want to bring it down just to questions. I'm on the right track. I've got the right idea. I'm starting to get certain, but I have some questions that need to be answered. Jane, we're just going to work on that. It's not going to be that hard. We just have to get the doubts down, shrink doubt. When it comes to conflict with the self, slide over to the power column and start to think about why. What is the conflict? Let's get it defined. What makes you out of power? And by the way, if we do the core narrative, that will help as well. So, Jane, we can follow up on that as needed. Please do let me know what you're thinking. You're going to be okay, though. You make sense. Your symptoms make sense. And there's help. I'm here. Plenty of ways to do it. The groups are a great way to do it. If you haven't taken the seminars yet, by the way, and you want to just know how to think about the columns, they're the way to go. So please do let me know. It's dan@crushingdoubt.org, or you can go to our website, www.crushingdoubt.org, and you can order any of those right there. Okay, Daniel Starkey is on Instagram, and he says, we often think fight or flight is heart pounding or adrenaline, but it's also freeze and fawning. Exactly. Are you holding your breath? Shallow breathing, tense, mind racing, that's all fear too. Love this, Daniel. Really well said. That's all fear too. It equals not feeling safe. Regarding the prior comment on if we can be in fight or flight without realizing. Yes, completely well said. So what we need to do is start orienting ourselves, and this is why I brought it into a trauma kind of perspective. We want to start thinking of it as, are we activated in trauma? Do we feel in danger? Because feeling in danger takes many different forms. If we can't stay present, if we're not calling words to mind really easily, if we're forgetting certain things, These are all signs that something's going on. We don't feel safe. And it happens all the time, by the way. I was just picking up my daughters from school and I found myself distracted and I couldn't pay attention to what they were saying so much, which I hate because I want to be present. I want to be a really present parent. So what did I do? I thought, okay, wait a minute. What's going on here? And I realized there was something going on in my emotional life that had just happened that had activated something. So we have to learn to recognize the signs that we're not feeling safe. They're very multifaceted. If you find yourself feeling defensive, you're not feeling safe. If you find yourself sometimes feeling like you just want to go to sleep, that might be a sign that you're not feeling safe. Consider whether you're feeling safe or not. The more I study this, the more I find people are not feeling safe a lot of the time. It's another reason why I do things the way that I do in the community is I want it to feel safe here. It's incredibly important that we build that in. To what degree am I successful with that? I don't totally know, but that's the goal, or at least it's part of the goal. The other goal is to get the information, to understand it all. So thank you for that observation, Daniel. I appreciate it. Okay, Jamie has a follow-up. Yes, I got a bad flu right after a mild cold because I had to cover 2 different coworker vacations. Wow. Tricks to prevent this type of stress from compounding into illness. Okay. My number one line of defense is anger. Sarno said it's all about anger. And it really, a lot of times it is. I've even taught my daughter this. It's like when you're feeling afraid of something, one of the antidotes to fear is to get angry, to recognize what we're angry about. So Jamie, what I would probably want you doing there is what I call raging internally. I'd want you to think about what's unfair about this. That gives us something we can do in that moment. And you'd have a much easier time fighting that off if you were thinking, okay, well, I don't know if it's about the coworkers and how they take off time unfairly, or the people at the top of the food chain there who are deciding what's happening, or if you're not feeling valued in some way. The more we know, the less likely symptoms are to start. That's an emotions column experience. Just become aware of them and hammer away at being aware of them. Jamie, please do let me know if that makes sense to you. Okay, follow up from Catherine Toomer. She says, I have made a few action steps to deal with my core issues. And for those of you who are watching, by the way, Mary Cloud is her daughter, so that's why the name's popping up. I've made a few action steps to deal with my core issues. They seem helpful to a degree, at least. Good start. But if it is real hard to do them, does that mean I'm still not listening to all the communications from the symptoms? The action steps are: 1, remember that you are deeply loved. 2, make your yes a yes and your no a no. I like that. Mean what you say. Then no need for rumination. 3, catch up to the present moment. 4, gently release the OCD-fueled, unfinished feeling nagging at my gut. These are very good action steps, by the way, Catherine. My compliments to you on them. There may be more, and it really is the case that the groups are the best way to answer this kind of question, and I'll tell you why. I can give you an answer, and I'm giving you an answer that yes, those action steps are good, but the groups allow for that give and take right in the moment, so that we can get even further. Because I have questions that I want to ask you. And that's one of the huge things about the group is I can ask you questions, you can respond right away, and we can keep having that dialogue. So what I think that I would say about these is that these are very good action steps, but I do have a question as to whether they're going to get you far enough some of the time. They're going to help. They're very good. But I would want to know more about what's happening. It's almost like in the column system, I always want to know what's the main problem here, because if I can identify the problem, I can get you a better solution. So I want to get this problem even more articulated. As an example, what is it you're feeling ambivalent about? What is it that you're feeling indecisive about? When I ask those questions, I can find out more about what's happening, and then I can get you better answers. So Catherine, I apologize if that's kind of half of an answer here, but that's part of why the groups can be so important, is we have that back and forth. Then said, Catherine said, I think I will soon be joining the groups again. So glad. Fantastic. Because that will allow us to get you just get much more out of it. I'm not saying the Q&A isn't good, because I think that it very much is, but it doesn't give us the chance to have the two-way street quite as much. I mean, I try to have it as much as I can here, but that's a way that we can really dig in. And so, even if you don't rejoin the groups, your next question here could be about, or you could tell me more about the specifics. Okay. Thanks, Catherine. Dorisa said, I'm not feeling safe right now because I've had to deal with something I don't want to. I'm sorry, Dorisa. Feeling unsafe is the worst. It is making me not able to focus. So that's right. Not feeling safe is a really, really bad feeling. And in many ways, it gets downplayed. It's just, oh, yeah, you feel safe sometimes not. That's not the way I think about it, actually. You're either trauma activated or you're not. You can feel not particularly safe, but not trauma activated. And that's different. When you feel trauma activated and you can't even focus, you're feeling really unsafe. So what I'd want you to do, Dorisa, is same thing as with Catherine. I want to get this articulated. Let's find out in specific why you're not feeling safe. Okay, I'm going to take 2 questions now at the end here, and we'll wrap up. Daniel Starkey says, is that why you chose the term power for that column? Because we can't take all risks or danger out of life, but we can learn and become stronger, more powerful to overcome challenges. Like the more power we feel, the less we need to fear. Essentially, yes. I found power to be the word that I chose for multiple reasons, but I think primarily it gets the most done in just what you're saying. You could describe it as like strength or confidence. There's other words that could apply there. It never felt strong enough, but power feels really strong, even though some people don't like the word actually because they think it has some kind of bad connotation. I don't mean it as power like lording it over other people. I mean power in your relationship with you, where you just feel like, yeah, this feels good. I'm headed in the right direction with me. So it covers the most ground. It opens up space for us to have the best relationship with ourselves, in my estimation. You guys might have to adjust the word if it doesn't work for you, and that's okay. Some people adjust the word columns. They think it sounds too artificial or clinical or whatever. To me, I just think of that piece of paper. It doesn't feel like something clinical or artificial. It feels like notes on me. It feels like a way to describe myself. So find the words that work for you. But in terms of power for that column, yes, it's about recognizing. You know what it is, Daniel? I'll say this. It is a way of recognizing ourselves, because so often we don't feel empowered, but we don't think about it that way. So it labels something very useful. Let me know if that answers your question. It's a great, great question, and I want to follow up on it. I might even take it down just as something to consider for maybe bringing back as a specific question, because there's so much in it. But hopefully I answered it at least to some satisfaction. Let me know, and we can go from there. We'll finish up on Karen Isaacs. She says, I love the antidote to fear is to feel the rage. I want to not hate feeling rage. I feel I was so angry, bratty, or so I was told as a kid. In recent years, I went opposite and acted like a good girl. How to find the middle ground? Well, for one thing, let's combat what happened to you as a child. That was unfair for you to be labeled as bratty just because you were angry. Good parenting would go the opposite. It would say, Karen, life's hard. There's lots of reasons to be angry. You have every reason to feel angry. Let's find out more about it. Wouldn't that be great if that was the way that parents dealt with their kids when they're angry? I will tell you, and I'm not saying I'm a perfect parent because nobody is, and I mean it. There are ways in which I don't like that. But I always apologize when I mess up. I try to anyway, if I know about it. And I try to do some things that are different than what happened for me. And one of them is if I hear my kids are angry, I assume that they make sense and their symptoms make sense. And anger is a symptom. So let's find out why. Why are you angry? I want to know. That curiosity dials down the toxicity and judgment. There doesn't have to be middle ground. You are a good person. You're going to go on being a good person. You couldn't help it if you tried. You're a goodist. But you also are an angry person because you're a human being. We're all angry. So let yourself be angry. There doesn't have to be middle ground. Rage internally. You can still be good on the outside unless somebody really crosses a line. So that's, I think, where that middle ground is. If you really cross a line, it's time to let that anger out at that person sometimes. Karen, I hope that's helpful. Okay, Jane Smith says, thanks again, Dr. Dan. Really good to see you today and really good to hear you as well. Jane, your words, you can make me smile even when I'm in a terrible state. Well, I'm glad to hear it, but you're not going to stay in a terrible state, Jane. We're going to get you out of it. We just have to understand it and use those symptoms. They point us in the right direction. You are making progress, and let's keep it up. I'll finish up on Daniel Starkey here. He says, yeah, it makes sense, especially because you said trauma activated, and a lot of trauma happens because we felt powerless. Bingo. Yes. I think maybe at some level, unconsciously, I chose power for that reason. I just kind of understood it. It's more unfolded as I've gone. I've adjusted terms when I've needed to. I have not only not felt the urge to adjust the term power, I've felt that it's exactly right on, and I'm so happy with it. But trauma happens because we feel powerless, especially as children, and those core wounds. Now, as adults, we can learn to take our power back as we are far more capable than we give ourselves credit for. Beautifully said, Daniel. I just couldn't say it better. So I will leave your words out there. Completely agree. But ultimately, the power column gives us a chance to make those different choices, to actually feel like, yeah, now we are adults. Now we can do something different. Guys, it is a pleasure to be here with you as always. I will be back here next Thursday. I'm going to be here every Thursday except for the week between Christmas and New Year's. I'm going to be out that Thursday. I can't remember which day that is. I believe that is the 29th. I think that's the right Thursday. But that's the week I'm out. Other than that, I'm here on Thursdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Keep those questions coming. These have been great questions. I love it. I could keep talking to you guys forever about this. So we will. Let's have a long, long discussion about this to get, and I don't mean that in terms of keep your symptoms going for a long time. Absolutely not. I want it to be that people get past their symptoms and then find this subject to be so fascinating that we continue to have the discussion, start to have a national and international discussion about this until this is the way that people think about things. That's the goal here. Guys, thank you so much. It's a pleasure as always. And I will see you guys same time next week, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. If you guys need to reach me, it's dan@crushingdoubt.org. You can go to our website, www.crushingdoubt.org. It's got the seminars on it. It's got the groups. And I love what Daniel said here. Let's keep on crushing. Absolutely. And Rita says, thanks, Dan. Good to see you here, Rita. Thank you so much, guys. Looking forward to seeing you next week.